I would like to ask Mr. Paul Dujardin, the CEO and Artistic Director of Bozar, to join me on stage. Give it up for him. Mr. Paul Dujardin.
Je suis l'ambassadeur intérimaire de l'ambassade des États-Unis en Belgique. Et ambassadeur, chers artistes et invités du festival, mesdames et messieurs, dames et heren, dear friends, au nom du Palais des Beaux-Arts de Bruxelles, je voudrais vous souhaiter la bienvenue au nom de toute mon équipe au festival Afropolitan. Nous avons fait le choix d'ouvrir cette édition par le film de Rokhaya Diallo, qui vient de nous plonger au cœur des questions qui vont être abordées durant ces 3 jours. The theme this year is Black Atlantic, an echo to the geographic and cultural space binding Africa, the Americas and Europe, in which black cultures have circulated and reinvented themselves. It was thus natural to solicit a partnership with the US Embassy in Belgium. I wish to thank the public diplomacy service of this embassy, which has supported the presence of American filmmakers Jody Dash and Damon Davis. Het engagement van Bozar om de Afropolitaanse schepping te ondersteunen is niet nieuw en dateert van lang voor er sprake was van een modeverschijnsel. Het paleis Bozar werkt al jaren samen met kunstenaars uit Afrika of van Afrikaanse afkomst. Met dit festival en het nieuwe permanente Afrika-departement roepen we een uniek platform in het leven. Op die manier kunnen Afropolitaanse creatie en kwesties in de schijnwerpers worden geplaatst en kan erover van gedachten worden gewisseld in dit cultuurhuis. Tout comme le film de Diallo, le débat qui va suivre sur le Black History Month va aborder des questions essentielles pour nos sociétés métissées. Je voudrais remercier les participations et les partenaires de ce débat, particulièrement l'artiste Picho, pour leur engagement qui n'est pas seulement artistique mais aussi citoyen et politique au sens premier du terme, c'est-à-dire impliqué dans les affaires de la cité. James Baldwin disait « Le futur des Noirs dans ce pays », il parlait bien entendu des États-Unis d'Amérique, est précisément aussi lumineux ou sombre que le futur de ce pays. Today, the stained glass works of Kehinde Wiley, presented at Bozar, reflects tonight but light. Et je vous souhaite un échange fécond. Et vous donne rendez-vous tout à l'heure dans le grand hall Horta, le hall de sculpture, pour l'ouverture officielle de ce festival. Merci beaucoup.
I would like to invite on stage Mr. Matthew Lucenop, a chargé d'affaires at the US Embassy in Brussels. And the US Embassy supports a lot of events of this festival, including this debate.
Good evening. Bonsoir, Daven. It's a real honor for me to be here today to introduce this discussion on Black History Month and to be part of the opening of Afropolitan. It was an African-American historian, journalist, author by the name of Carter Woodson, who was the father of Black History Month in the United States. He was among the first scholars to study the history of African Americans in the United States. And in 1926, he established what they called a Negro History Week in February, which continued, and then in 1976, it was expanded into an entire month, the month of February, dubbed Black History Month, and that continues to this day. And it's interesting to me as an American to see other countries, other societies looking at that tradition and considering similar approaches. So this week, as part of the U.S. Embassy's marking of Black History Month, as Mr. Dujardin said, we're hosting an African-American filmmaker, Julie Dash, the director of Daughters of the Dust, a great movie about the experiences of the Gullah speaking people in the southern parts of the United States. Artist Damon Davis is in town as part of the Afropolitan program. Bozar is also, as Mr. Dujardin mentioned, exhibiting the work of Kehinde Wiley. And it's all part of a way of energizing the exchange and dialogue across the Atlantic on our shared African heritage and influences. And it's going to continue later this summer. We'll be hosting an African-American conceptual artist, Willie Hank Thomas, who will participate in Bozar's Summer of Photography. Why do we do this? I mean, one of the major roles of the U.S. Embassy in any country is to build bridges and partnerships between people and institutions, between our two countries. And whatever the politics of the moment, U.S. and Belgium share deep common values and experiences, and we need to continue to engage in people-to-people exchange based on that shared history and our mutually held beliefs and ideas. And all this would not be possible without great Belgian partners like Bozar, a great European institution of culture. And I'd like to thank CEO Dujardin, Artistic Director Dujardin, the institutional advisor Raphael Miles, Kathleen Lowe, and the whole Bozar team. We're great partners to work with. Finally, I'd like to thank the panelists for tonight for contributing to the discussion. I really look forward to hearing from you, and I'll turn the floor over to Marie-France. Thank you all for coming. I really looking forward to our discussion. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Lussenhoop. Let's start with the debate. I would like to ask Mr. Omar Ba and all the speakers to join me on stage.
Good evening. My name is Omar Ba, and I will be hosting this debate, this moderation about Black History Month. And for that, I have, I'm not alone. I'm with four great intervenants, panelists. We're going to talk about Black History Month. And all right, okay. So I will introduce the panel first. Linda Bellos, who is an activist, politician, intellectual, who has been contributing to the advancement of communities in the UK, yeah? And elsewhere, connecting with different communities around the world, and also the first organizer of Black History Month in the UK.
Not quite. I'll say.
All right. Yeah? Okay. Okay. Good. And to my right, John Leerdam. If I would define him, I would say that I see Martin Luther King, I see Jesse Jackson, I see Nelson Mandela in one person, and I see Spike Lee, more of all, because he was active in film, innovator of many events to give visibilities to African the people from African descent in Netherlands, to empower them into politics, and also the creator of Black Achievement Month. And he will explain what he means by Black Achievement Month. To my left, a man that in Belgium don't need introduction. Do you know him? All right, okay. So you see, yeah, I'm right. So Tunde, urban dramaturge, is right. Silly dramaturge, all right. In French as well. Okay, good. Yeah. So a man who is connecting people, ideas, talent, and aspiration in the KVS, and who is trying to shape the city with all that talent. And to my other left, I have a man. I think that many of you know him. Or who don't know him, I will introduce real fast. He's a poet, a great slam artist, active in theater, but at the same time, he was the man who put to many in the Netherlands and also in Belgium attention to the question of Black Pete. That's one aspect. And I think that afterwards, maybe if he wants to tell about that, we can talk about that too. But meanwhile, before we start the debate, he will introduce by giving us a poem. So please.
Not necessarily a poem. Hi, good evening. Hi. Not necessarily a poem, but a performance piece. So you guys know what this is? It's an hourglass, right? Okay, so I've got 5 minutes.
Welcome to February, home of Valentine's Day, the occasional leap year, but many of us know it as Black History Month. This February, armed with a camera and a little courage, I decided to do something a little out of the box. Sign my petition? Excuse me, sir. I'd like to sign my petition.
I don't think I can sign that. I feel it is empowering to Black History Month because that is the only time that we get to speak.
In Black History Month. Let's try to be provocative.
I don't care if nobody says it's tired, it's boring. We should move on. It should always be acknowledged.
Well, there's no part of American history that's not affected by this interaction of white and black.
Power to the people.
If I were a person who didn't like Black history, I'd agree with you.
Here we are, another year, where we're just going to try to cram everything into 1 month, and that's so inadequate.
If you're coming from a predominantly white institution or if you're just coming from a regular public school, you don't learn anything about it until that month, and then they'll just stop talking about it.
I am not advocate of Black History Month. Week, month, 6 months, or year.
To have Black History Month is sort of exceptionalizing African Americans, almost treating them a certain amount of condescension.
They are selling something. I mean, at the end of the day.
Yeah, you know what? You know we are in business to make money. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
If we just gradually put it into every class, now it's not African American history, it's just history.
Well, I think something just went wrong. And I love that because it exactly proves my point. I still have a couple of minutes left for my performance. And when it comes to Black history, African diaspora history, just having a silence and thinking about it is difficult for a lot of people. And we need to fill that space up. People want to talk, people want to present things, but just thinking about what it means to have Black bodies on stage within an institution as Bozar, talking about history, already pushes. So let's just stay with the silence just for like a minute more. And just think about what it means for us here to critically be thinking about these themes.
Thank you. So, I think that it's a good introduction, by the way. So, I will ask a question to Linda about you've been organizing Black History Month since. Okay.
So organising.
So.
Black History Month in UK has been organised by whoever chooses to organise it. And I have to tell you, some of the things that have been done in the name of Black history are insulting. I'm talking about recently in rural England, the only black child was picked upon and made to do extraordinary things because he was a black child and it was Black History Month. Now that is not understanding what we started Black History Month for. And people ought to know that we hadn't. I'm very conscious. We were very conscious that America, who had started Black History Month, organised it in February. But in Britain, I authorised it. I didn't organise it. It wasn't my idea. I happened to be the politician in power who, when confronted with the request, said, "What a bloody good idea." So we also tried to have an audience speaker, host, and that was Sally Mugabe. The only time she was available was in October. Black History Month in the United States of America is February. So Black History Month began on the 1st of October 1987. And I was the chair. I'm saying this because actually it's being questioned and it's being said that I wasn't responsible for it. Well, I don't think I was, in the sense that it wasn't my idea. But I was the politician who authorised it. And without a politician authorising it, it wouldn't have happened. It happened in local government. Local government had power. I was the leader, one of very few black people who were leaders. And I was then, and I hope I still am now, a bit radical. I can be somewhat blunt. I think having the advantage of having been born in Britain in 1950, there were 30,000 black people in Britain. That's not many out of millions. And I grew up believing that I had a right to be in Britain. In fact, grown men, adults who should have known better, told me to go back where I came from. And I would say, in my very London accent, "Give me an halfpenny, mate, and I'll get on a bus." I don't know if you understand that it was, that's how I used to speak. I've changed over the years, but there you are. Point is, though, that Britain had a long history of imperialism, of being proud of ruling half the world, if not more. And I must say that as a black child, I did not share this. I was and I am proud to be, I call myself more than British, I call myself English. I was born in England. I think that makes me English. And I think there's a lot to be proud of, but there's also a lot to have to recognise and acknowledge. No person alive today is responsible for some of the appalling things that happened in the history of Britain. There's no point blaming white English people, because some of them will have been as oppressed by systems of power that operated in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th and 20th centuries. So there's no point, it's not about blame, it is about acknowledging that African peoples have made an amazing contribution, I would say to Britain, but actually to Europe and indeed to the world, and we have yet to receive acknowledgement. I don't know about compensation, but I have also been involved in the African reparations movement, certainly in Britain. When I was working on it with Bernie Grant, and some of you may have heard, he was an extraordinarily wonderful man, and now long dead. He started, was an officer, as it were, in the international reparations movement. I and he argued that we were not talking about money. What had already happened in the history of African peoples is prices have been put on our heads. It was called enslavement. And I don't think that we could find sufficient money to compensate the peoples who are the heirs of enslavement. So there have to be other ways. And one of the things that we did ask for, I still think is a good idea, I'll throw it out to anyone who's interested, which is the cancellation of debts for Africa and the Caribbean. The circumstances in which trade deals were created by rulers who happened, by the way, not to be African. See, I'm still a bit critical.
But
have I answered your question now?
but it's a good introduction. Just to say now, since '87, that Black History Months have been organized in the UK by different actors in different ways. What do you think about it? What is the impact of it today?
Mainly good, and sometimes less so. I do think that if we were to start again, and if you are starting doing things, then I think there's merit in having a small group of possibly elected or certainly nominated representatives of a community who work within a government department, in other words, have resources. It's no good having great ideas if you haven't got the means to turn them into reality. And the good thing about being in a government department would be accountability for public money. Because if it is public money, it can't just be spent on whatever is a win. Public money should be properly spent. And so lots of things I would do again, and I'm working up to hopefully encouraging a new Labour government in London. I'm not going to hold my breath on it, but I'm hoping that it will happen. And I would hope that they would take seriously taking forward Black History Month. I think there are other communities who also need to be recognised. I'm not suggesting the black community is the only community to be recognised as having been oppressed. I certainly think of the gypsy and traveller communities in Britain who have been sorely and are continue to be sorely oppressed. So no competition about who's the most oppressed, but doing practical things that will show the history of Britain, and the history of Britain includes the history of enslavement.
Okay, thank you for this great contribution. Mr. Leder.
It's on.
So, yeah, you've been organizing the Black Achievement Month, but and why Black Achievement Month and not Black History Month? Maybe just to get into the debate.
Thank you, first of all, for inviting me. Every time when I come to Brussels, I think of my dear brother who was a diplomat here in this city. And answering your question, I think it's very important to go back. And I liked what my colleague just did, of us thinking for 1 or 2 minutes, where did it all start? And as I go back in time, because if you ask me Black History Month and Black Achievement Month, how did it go, where did it all happen? I was not the person who thought of the name, but they asked me, the NINSE, the Institute for Slavery, they asked me to actually be the artistic director and the project leader of the Black Achievement Month, and but I was the one who actually initiated it, because in 1984, as a matter of fact, they had in Holland, there was a movement who wanted a Black History Month. But the Dutch government at that particular moment felt that it was not appropriate for them to have a Black History Month, because they said everything that had to deal with black was the combination of all the different cultures in Holland also had to have part in that festival. So it was the American Embassy, as a matter of fact, who actually sponsored in 1984 the Stage Door Festival together with the Koninklijk Instituut voor de Tropen, the Royal Institute for Tropics. And they started Stage Door Festivals. So the American Embassy and consulate, as I must say, really, they actually financed people coming over from the States to Holland to start performing and actually sharing everything that was dealt with Black History Month. As a matter of fact, that was in February, and Stage Door Festival was in November, because they didn't want to be too close to anything that had to deal with Black History Month. So just to make that clear. When as a matter of fact, I was graduated in 1987 as the first black director of the theater school in Holland. And the year before I graduated, I went to the States to specialize in black theater and musical theater. And that's where actually I became very conscious of everything that had to deal with Black History Month. I visited several cities to do my research. I visited Texas, Washington, New York, Minneapolis, San Francisco, Atlanta, Chicago, and Los Angeles. And during that period also I met one of a great inspirator, James Baldwin. And he actually started, when I spoke to this man in the Bali, we have a culture center in Holland called the Bali, that's where I met him. And he actually, he's from the film, if those of you who maybe saw the film I'm Not Your Negro, which I launched also together with other people in Holland. When he spoke to me very directly, and he started to speak to me and making me conscious of the fact that where I was born, because I'm born in Curaçao, which is a small island in the Caribbean, but belongs to the Netherlands. You don't belong. No. Well, we're part of the kingdom. We're part of the kingdom. We don't belong. You're right. You corrected me. We're part of the kingdom. because the island stands on its own, but we're part of the kingdom. And during that evolution, actually, when we were actually, as an activist also, and semi-politician, and fighting for the slavery monument, I said to them, you cannot have a monument on slavery in the Netherlands and not have an institution and not have something similar to a Black History Month, or maybe give it a different name, but it has to deal with anything that the Black diaspora and slavery or whatever. And there were people like Norman de Palm, Felix de Roy, Rufus Collins, and Henk Chong, who actually, and several other people, and Beryl Biekman, must not forget her name, who actually supported me because I was a young rebel. I am now very tame. For some, I'm telling you like it is, because then this stage would have been much and much too small for me. Okay, and I can assure you, after 10 years in politics, you kind of change your, but it's still in me. So don't even try to pinch me, because then it will explode. But that is the moment when I said we have to do something about the Black Achievement Month, Black History Month. And while I was touring the United States of America, it was one song that actually that plugged in my system, and I will sing it to you because I think it's very important that you analyze also the lyrics. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. It was that song where actually that's where the seed was planted for the Black Achievement Month and to giving it form. That's the answer. I'm going to give it for now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, hold the mic, it's okay. It's all right. Quincy, you come from Curaçao, right?
Well, yeah. Curaçao and St. Martin.
And St. Martin.
Yeah, both.
All right. So you've been also an activist on addressing issues concerning people of African descent. And how do you look at the Black History Month from a distance? As a point?
Well, no, I'm not an activist. I just have a big mouth.
That's a nice nuance. Yeah, thank you.
Difference there.
Thank you for the nuance.
Yeah. I mean, it's also a question of the difference between mobilization and organization, right? I can rally people, I can say some stuff, but actual people behind the scenes who are organizing things, they're the ones who need to be getting actually the acknowledgement and accolades, right? My hypervisibility does not mean that I'm a leader. I think there's a difference between there that people sometimes misnow. So when thinking about the Black Achievement Month in the Netherlands, and I'm really grateful that it's there because I was awarded the Black Excellence Awards by them 2 years ago, and it's really interesting when you look back and you start to think about what does it mean for Black excellence, right? Within the Dutch context, Black excellence is not something that you hear a lot. Even the notion of putting those two words together in the Dutch context is strange for a lot of people. But I think what happens when you talk about history and when you talk about historical achievements, you then start to realize that it's not just about responsibility for the past, but it's about who is trying to dismantle the systems that are currently still part of that legacy of the past, right? So a lot of white people come up to me and they start screaming and like, hey, I'm not the one responsible for enslavement and slavery. And I'm like, yeah, but you're the one who is still responsible for voting in parties in parliaments that push people out. You're the one still part of the system that is creating deals with Turkey, creating deals with Libya, trying to, see people as bargaining chips. So yes, you are responsible. Yes, I will hold you accountable. And I think when it comes to also understanding how we look at people's achievements, it's also about knowing how to name people. And here I'm gonna be a little bit of a be a little bit, I'm going to tease you a little bit. But the artist's name is Hank Willis Thomas, not really Hank Thomas. So I think even there is the acknowledgement of whose achievements are we actually championing and who are we bringing into the conversations when we talk about what we're doing. And so one of the people, I'm trying to give him the microphone for a while now. So one of the people that made sure that I was able to do, a little bit of work here in the context of Brussels and kick up some feathers is Tunde. Because last year Tunde invited me to be an artist in residence at the KVS, and I made a piece which was specifically talking about activism, talking about Black history, talking about the history of Brussels, and talking about what does it mean to be an activist within that situation. Responsibilities, burnout, feeling betrayed, and where you go from there. And I think we should give the mic to Tunde.
Quincy. I already told them earlier, and Ola, there's my witness, that all I need is some tea, and they just can do the talking. Like, I don't need to say much today.
You have a lot to say.
No, I've already said so much. Like, I mean, keep on talking.
No.
Turn your clock around, and
No.
let's have a moment of silence.
No, hold the mic. Yeah. So no, I think that by the way is a kind of recognition of the great work you're doing. Yeah? So by this thanks. What do you have been living in the US? You live now in Brussels, in Europe. You have been traveling in different European countries where also Black History Month is getting organized. Do you think that Black History Month is the right concept for Europe? Do you think it has an impact, or it will have an impact? Do you think that we only have to look in the past without looking at the future, and how?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for Europe, I think it's really important to have something to cause reflection. It's really important to have something to rethink how we present ourselves as quote-unquote Europeans. Who are included in that definition of European? Why do we need something like Afropean as a label? And what type of languages are we using? I'm sorry, what kind of language are we using to describe those that are not necessarily seen as European? And how do we use that language to exclude individuals? How do we use that language as a token? So I think that something like a Black Achievement Month or a Black History Month is really necessary to kind of start reflecting and pushing the language forward, and also thinking about what we consider history. Whose history are we talking about? And whose history are we focusing on? And why is it that when we talk about history often, it's often about the history of colonization and gaining resources that has allowed Europe to build its mass social welfare? So talking about those things and really naming it is really important. So I don't necessarily, I don't think that you have to copy what the US is doing, but I think that we have to do something to make sure that we're stopping right now to look at our history, and also to look at the present situation and how the neoliberal system is kind of pushing certain people out of spaces, and how those spaces need to be reclaimed and occupied by individuals that have been here for many generations. And then, of course, thinking about, how we're envisioning our futures, Wakanda forever, sorry.
So hereby the Wakanda History Month, it's just starting, so.
I couldn't help myself.
Just saying, So, thank you for the invitation. But Tunde, please, just so last.
Where's my tea?
Yeah,
Please.
the tea is coming. The tea is coming.
Omar, you were. Ain't you tired of talking? Like we were just talking like a few weeks ago.
Yes, that's why I'm bringing you. By the way, this is the second debate about Black History Month, and the first debate was organized by Congolisation
and City Lab,
and the Bozar, so a collaboration, and where in fact when I hear the picture saying it is also important, for example, to specify when you name and Black History Month, the specific histories could be drawn into the Black History Month without getting them outside. Example, the Belgian context, where you have a specific history. And when you say black, you're talking about the universe here. You're talking about the whole world. It has a kind of a universal character, not a specific character, which is and maybe it's also what have been said in the last debate, denying some trajectories, historical trajectories and relations. And how do you deal with that? How do you look at this? And afterwards, maybe it's interesting to have the meaning of the other ones. But, yes, Quincy, please.
Well,
maybe we come after you for the team first, all right?
I think we're already spilling a lot of tea. I think in the context of the Netherlands, it's really interesting to look at what does this term black actually mean, right? In the Netherlands, we're a country whose colonization history is usually downplayed. We were one of the good ones. That's at least what we tell ourselves in our history books. We're the ones who weren't as bad as the English or the French, this kind of stuff, right? And then when it comes to the notion of bringing people together, you have a really interesting and really dangerous divide and rule type of ideology and systems going on in terms of funding for different things. So in the 1980s, maybe Mr. Leerdam could talk a bit about in the 80s, when there was a huge migration from people from the Dutch Caribbean to the Netherlands, they started policies in which they specifically looked at different migrant groups as being parts of pillars, right? So as the Dutch society was being depillarized, so going away from these boundaries between the Protestants, the Catholics, the what's the third one? The laborers, the proletariat, you could say. Those three groups were disappearing among the dominant white group, and then they got like these migrant groups which they could be put in pillars. They would get money for funding for their organizations that catered to their groups and all this kind of stuff. Now, what you get is that when you talk about black, you have people who are specifically first-generation African diaspora from different countries within the continent, so they already are in different groups that are being divided from each other, where you have the Somali group, which is not talking to the Ethiopian group, or you have the Ghanese group, which is not talking to the Senegalese group, all these kind of things happening. Even within the Dutch colonial history, you have the difference between people from Suriname versus people from the Dutch Caribbean, and even in between people from Suriname, you have people who are from Indian descent versus African descent versus Japanese descent versus Chinese descent. So the Dutch, what they did is they created all these different groups and told them all, here is some money, fight amongst yourself to figure out who gets the most, right? So when it comes to notions of solidarity and creating this understanding of what it could mean to be a person of color, to be a person who's black within the Dutch context, these groups were not connecting to one another. They were not having the necessary conversations about what does it mean to collaborate towards an abolishing of the systems that keep us apart. Right? What does it mean to become an accomplice in liberation from these capitalist, colonialist, patriarchal systems that put us down? And then you get situations like 2008, you get situations like 1966, you get situations where people are starting to speak up and talk about what does it mean to fight against figures that carry with them colonial legacies and legacies of oppression, which are seen as benign. And I think there is where the conversation then comes in with achievement, right? Because when you postulate achievement as not connected to your ethnicity, then you get a completely different conversation. I think that's what's been happening with the Black Achievement Month.
Thank you. Linda, do you recognize what Quincy is saying?
I do, and I think we have to start looking at solutions, not just describing the problem. And it does strike me that one of the things certainly the British did, and I suspect, and you didn't mention South Africa in the thing about the Netherlands, that had some role to play, I believe. I've now not using the word race anymore. I don't believe that there is anything but the human race. When people talk about a black race or a white race, biologically, scientifically, it's rubbish. Genetically, which I think some genes have something to do with it, there is more in common between many African people and many European people, for example. But within the category of whiteness, there is a huge amount of differences, and yet they're all apparently one race. It's rubbish. I think we do need to recognise racism, people acting on the belief that somebody who is different from you, whether that is because of your religion, and think about the 6 counties of Ireland, in which there's been some trouble for some time around differences. They're all Christians, or at least they claim to be, and some of them believe in one version of Christianity and others another, and yet they act in ways which I would recognise, I think most of us would recognise as racism. I think we have to unpick this, and forgive me, chaps, but I think that some women have to play an active part in this, because lots of men have been fighting with each other to the point of killing each other. We do need to sort out the differences between us around so-called race. The arguments, and there's an expression I have, there are no children in the room, but I certainly know that there are chaps who play a game which is called peeing up the wall. I call it something else myself, a bit cruder. And I think that competition between men about who can pee up highest up the wall, or who can kill the most, or buy as many guns, or all of those competitive things need to be unpicked. It isn't inevitable that if you've got a willy, you want to kill someone. It isn't inevitable. However, culturally, it is being promoted. And I do want to say that when we're thinking about the word race, and certainly when we think about racism, let's not just have this as a men's conversation. There's a women's conversation to be had, and I hope a joint conversation about our common humanity. Not only what do we have apart, but what do we have in common as human beings? Because actually, there is as much. It's not, our differences aren't related to the colour of our skin. And it really makes me angry that the guys who claim they're so blasted superior are so damn stupid and know nothing about facts around differences, making huge amounts of difference, killing other people because of differences. And in general, women don't do it. Margaret Thatcher is an example of somebody who, women are perfectly capable of doing it, and lots of men don't. So this is not biological. We can learn how to view each other in a respectful way, including respecting our cultural heritage, because the world is a better place with cultural diversity.
And do you think that having a moment to celebrate that cultural heritage is necessary? And how would you call it?
I think having time to think, to stand back and think about the situation we're in and what we can do to improve it is a good thing. Some people do it in church, some people do it in a mosque, some people do it in a synagogue, some people do it in their cultural activity. So I'm not going to suggest that one means is the only way, or one is better, but I do think that we owe it to ourselves and to the future of this planet to give due consideration of what will make it better, not just how can I get one over on another person for whatever reason, but how can we, us in this room, and after all, we could all be doing something else. We choose to be here. We are choosing to do something better, to hear, to listen, to talk, to hopefully to think about making the world a better place so that we don't have to have a campaign in 30 years' time against racism. I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. But I do think it is worth us working towards. That means we need to be conscious of it, of all of the diversity. And I'm talking, when I think about diversity, I think about some of the work that's being done recently around disability, some of the appalling things that have happened to disabled children and adults. And we're beginning to see the human rights of a person who may have been born with or acquired a disability that's impacted on their lives. All of these things are important for me because it's not just racism, it's not just sexism, it's surely the wonderfulness of human beings, at least the potential for us to be. Well, you can call it a fancy word like that. I think every one of us, I don't call it intersectionality because I happen to be, as you are, more than one blasted thing. We're all more than one thing.
So, wait, not a debate like this. Afterwards, you're going to have the opportunity to have a question. So, before I come to you, I like to project one video and then I come to you. Video, please, the second one. And you don't have a performance, right? Okay, we had silence, now we have empty.
Hello! Black History Month is a commemoration, vocab word, for black activists, another vocab word, who took their time out to go fight for what they feel is right. Like Martin Luther King had a speech that violence is not the answer and no segregation. We celebrate black people that helped us change history.
It reminds us to be strong even in politics.
Wait, what matters is what's inside of you and how you act to other people.
Doesn't matter if you're black, if you're white. You should always celebrate it because you know the struggles black leaders went through in order for you to be here right now.
Even though we may have the different skin color, we're still the same type of people, no matter what.
And a lot of people, they don't see me for who I am. They see my outside appearance, but they don't see what I have on the inside.
It's very hard to grow up knowing that you're black and you have a lot of personal prejudice against you.
I see it on the TV and I'm like, is that going to happen to my brother? Is that going to happen to my dad? I always have that in the back of my mind every time that I'm home and they're not home.
Black history is important to me because I have to remember where I came from and I have to remember who came before me.
Because you have to look at the things that Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X did for us black people, so people can't treat us unfairly because they think some type of belief.
Because we are all people and we need to stand up for our rights.
There's still discrimination. There's still discrimination in all parts of the world, in all parts of the United States. We should still fight for what we believe in. We should still fight for getting what's right.
Okay, so Black Achievement Month.
Yes.
And the future. And the future by excellence are kids.
Yes, the excellence of our kids, but also of ourselves. Recognizing who we are. And the whole idea and the philosophy that the conceptual thinking that I did with the festival is that we had to start celebrating our own successes. Not only in the Netherlands or in the Caribbean or in Africa or in the States, but all over the whole world. And I think that is very important. And I do believe in, partly in race. So, because I think race is something that played a very important role in everything that has been going on lately. And will also, and always will remain in a certain way. We are one human race, that's true. But I could never forget, and I think everything is always also very personal. Everything what you do is very personal. In 1982, when I came from the Netherlands and from the Netherlands and from Curaçao actually, and started the theater school here in Maastricht, not in Europe, in Maastricht, but in Holland, in Maastricht. The director of the school, came up to me after a presentation and he said to me, you're very talented, but I do think that one, your Dutch is not APN, which is a certain way of speaking Dutch. Two, your face is asymmetric. And three, let's be honest, you are black. And the Dutch theater companies will not, zullen niet jou opnemen in hun gelederen. They will not let you accept you as being part of within their organization. So I advise you, Mr. Jacques Giese told me that, I advise you to go back to the Caribbean and actually go and study theater in the Caribbean, because Holland is not ready for you, and we want people who graduate from this school to have a job. And I was in shock, because here I am, a middle-class guy, black guy, who has a Jewish mother, Jewish Portuguese mother, who has a black father from Suriname, who was born in Curacao, went to a mixed high school, a culture diverse high school, went to piano lessons, flute lesson, was part of the orchestra, youth orchestra, did taekwondo, danced well, was very articulate, was the chair of the student body, and so forth, is now being said that I couldn't study theater because I was black. So it took me 2 or 3 days, and then my sister called me and she said, get your black ass out of the bed. That's what she said to me. I'm translating it from Dutch. And she said to me, because our parents worked too hard and they've been through too much for you to feel sorry for yourself. Because no one is going to do it for you, and we have no time to waste. So get up, get your black ass out of that bed, and start going to look for another study, or finish this and do something else. I did both. And at that particular moment, I decided that no one, nowhere in the world, was ever going to tell me that I could not do something. And as my mother said to me, can't means you don't want to. So I had that in my brain. And no race, and not the color of my skin, could make that I could not be a theater maker, a director, a politician, or whatever. So I started to kick ass. And my mouth was crooked. Yes, it was crooked, but it became more crooked. And I decided that I was going to finish the theater schools, but I finished it in Amsterdam. And I finished it. I was an honor student, and because I wanted to make sure and start an own theater school in Curacao for all those other black students, that they never had to go through what I went through. And that was in 1982, and I graduated in 1987 as the first. And that led me also to go and study film. And that led me also to go and study international and public affairs. And finally also to go into politics. And nowadays I do too many things to mention. But that is to tell you that we have not to be sorry for ourselves. So in that sense we agree. But to say that race is not part of this, it is.
Oh no, race is part. I am only saying I don't believe that our race is. There's racism, absolutely. Okay. But I'm not sure, I'm not convinced that the definitions of what constitutes a race has any foundation in fact, in reality, in any science.
Okay. And that's why I think it's very important that we, who've been through the whole Black History Month and looking at the achievement of all these diverse people with all shades of black, and also our brothers and sisters that are white who support us, sitting with them, discussing with them, and looking at the achievements that we have had through the years, the history, the present, and the future. And we should
coach and be a mentor for the younger generation. And that's what we are trying to do also with the Black Achievement Month.
Thank you. I'm just great. Yeah, just about that point, very inspired. But, you know, I mean, the thing is that, of course, you know, I think that we definitely need to try to move slowly from this idea of race, but we can't forget that race is a construction that has been used, you know, very strategically. You know, it was first used as a way in the U.S. to count people and to separate people, but it's also been used strategically, and that we can't forget, and we can't neglect that. And I'm not saying that you're doing that. I'm just saying that it's really important to keep that in mind, so that when, for example, this is something totally different, but when somebody says Black Lives Matter, that they're talking about the structures that have been maintained and built through centuries to oppress certain individual. So just that one thing. And then the other thing, just real quick, just the other thing, because I'm still waiting for my tea, so I'm not going to say much. Just the other thing, you know, John, you know, I found your story, you know, very inspired, you know, but it reminded me of something I was writing down. I was like, you know, what is Black History Month or Black Achievement Month or whatever you want to call it in the era of Beyonce, in the era of Jay-Z? I hope they ain't no Beehive folks here tonight, because I know how you are. Hey, chill, all right? I'm just trying to make a point. But in the era of Jay-Z and in the era of Obama, you know, we have to ask ourselves that, because what is being perpetuated and pushed by neoliberal systems is the idea of the individual pulling themselves up by the bootstraps. And how dangerous that can be in terms of trying to build a community and working towards solidarity. You know, so I think it's really important to push these successful stories and how strong we can be. You know, we come from, you know, Harriet Tubman, we come from Frederick Douglass, we come from Sojourner Truth. You know, we come from, you know, so many individuals, you know, that have pushed us forward. Rosa Parks, thank you very much. You know, but we have to remember, as you know, I know it's corny now, but you know what Chimamanda said in terms of the danger of a single story. You know, and really kind of seeing, okay, we are up here, you know, and we're doing this. Obama has done that. Jay-Z has done that. But how do we make sure that those that do not have the privileges that we have at least get our hand and we reach back to them, you know, and not expect them to do it for themselves, right? Great, but before I just I give you the mic, I wanted to add something. It's like when you talk about Black History Month in the US and naming the name that you names, when I look at Europe and I look at the African migration of Caribbean migration, I would be tempted to say Samori Touré, Shaka Zulu, Thomas Sankara, Silvio Olimpo, Lumumba, you know what I mean? And so on and so on. So it is important also, yeah, but you, Brangari Matai, you have many of them, and stories, because I think that when you talk about Black History Month, it is important also when we're talking in the European context to develop also European to us related historical context, and to not only do a copy paste without. And being also, like you say, on table nearby, we say that now we came to a momentum where you have this kind of worldwide Black community as well, who is interacted and interconnected and sharing history and information. But you have specific contexts where you need also to address those historical specificity. It's important, yeah.
Because look, one thing, the new media is forcing us also to disclose this, because we were not taught. We were not taught that firsthand. So now, because of the new media and because traveling has become cheap, in a sense, even though every time when I travel, my mother always tells me, she's 92, she tells me, make sure you don't look like a shabby person, you know, because when she was traveling, she was up to talk always, she and my father, they looked like the president from I don't know where, but you would swear that it was the president and his wife going to God knows where. But new media has brought us now that we have to acknowledge all of that. And so it's time to disclose that.
Indeed. Thank you.
I want to be very clear. I am saying that I don't believe there are races of human beings, but I certainly think there is racism. People who believe that there are races, characteristics that usually cover skin colour. And now it's so unscientific. It's rubbish. There's no foundation in fact, but lots of differences, and I remember I was thinking about Swift, the writer, differences between which end you open your egg, and men fighting about whether there were big enders or little enders. It's absolute rubbish, and I have to tell you, it is mainly chaps. There aren't many women who go to war. Thatcher was one of them. But there aren't many women who go to war, fight with each other, stand up fights with each other, in the way culturally men are doing it. I am the mother of a son. I have one grandson, and I have two step-grandsons. I want these children, these boy children, to live, not have to fight, not have to die. All of them won't, but some of them will, as we know culturally. And I do think that it's not unique to African men. It's not to black men. It's not unique. However, it's sufficiently damaging that we have to consider when we're thinking about the future and making the world a better place, as we are, then let's add all of the things, and violence is one of them. And violence of black men being encouraged to be violent and being killed. Look at the number of deaths in police custody in America with what is meant to be arrests. And 1 second later, the black man is dead. This is not good, and I think we have to think about violence in our understanding of how the world is and how we want the world to be a better place.
All right. Thank you. You do? Yeah. No, but I think it's interesting. We were about achievements also,
Yes.
because I think it's. Do you think that Black History Month? Because, like we've been saying, we have a lot of focus about the history, which is important.
Yes.
Because and Black History Month does not only address to community, but address to the societies.
Yes.
Yeah? I think it's a shared history, like we've been saying, and like the two speakers introduced. It's a shared history, a shared legacy, but not always a recognized legacy. But also we need to build a future, an inclusive future.
Exactly.
And do you think that Black History Month can contribute to that inclusive future? And how? Of a Black Achievement Month, of whatever else?
I think Black Achievement Month and Black History Month can also be inclusive, can also be that. It all depends how the artistic director or the director of the festival, how you actually program it, because it's education is one of the main issues, and I think that Black History Month is not only for the faithful few sitting here or people who know or intellectually who know about this, but it's very going into the schools and making sure that people know how it actually is in tuned with everything that you're doing. And when you see the people walking in Antwerp, or you see the people in Brussels or in Leuven or other places, ask yourself also the question, how come that they're here? How come the people are in the country? And actually, and the kids that are being born, who are bicultural, or how you want to call it, or black, the new black, or whatever you want to call it, give it the name. I think it's very important also that we have to educate them also, and not to do as if those that have fought who have fought in the history, that they are the young generation, that they neglect them, and so it's an and it is and.
All right.
So, and also looking to the future.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm sorry. What I also want to say, and we have to be aware that we have to build a community that is economically independent. If we do not start investing in that only for the individuals, but also as a community, making sure that we're not only going to the government to get the finances or whatever, but economically, those who are doing a bit better, coming together and maybe creating a fund or whatever, so that we can be economically independent, then it will even happen quicker. I will give you an example. When I was a director of Cosmic, which was which was a small, you can say a small company in Amsterdam, but it became big. When I started, I got finance from the government for 600,000 euros. And I decided, I told my board of directors, I want to do a production, I want to go to Broadway with a production. But it's cost 1.2 million to make the production. They said to me, but John, that is impossible, we don't have that kind of money. I said, but then we have to find it. So they said, but where are you going to find it? I said, I'm going to find it myself. So I found the money. 1.2 million, I found the money. It was the first all black production in Holland on stage. And we toured. The production made 3.4 million euros then. I'm talking about the year 2000. And we had a gain, winst of 648,000 euros then, which was a lot of money. True, I made that much money, and the production in the whole of Holland was sold out. It gave me the liberty for the next years to make the productions. For example, I wanted to do Romeo and Juliet, a Caribbean experience. It gave me the liberty to invest in my own production, in doing something else, not only to go to the government to ask for the money. And because of that, we generated more financial independence. And what you got is that we created a whole setting that we started coaching 12 young theater makers without asking the government the money to do that. So we became independent of doing that. It's very important to mention these things, because when you're independent of not only going to them, for them saying yes, but you have to also have somebody of Moroccan or Moroccan or Turkish or this, that in your company, otherwise we cannot fund it. I didn't have to ask them because I had my own money. And we showed them, we worked together with churches, we worked together with other organizations, and we packed the place every night. So we became independent. And because of that, everyone in Holland started also looking at what we were doing. So I think it's very important that you also look within the Black Achievement Month or Black History Month or whatever, also look at the economics of the whole idea.
Indeed. So not only history, education, but also empowerment.
Empowerment.
And training.
And training and finance. Finance, because there's some very wealthy black people out there. Yes, but the black people, they're supporting the opera, but they're not supporting their own productions. So you have to get them, but they only want to support it if it's successful.
Indeed. So thank you for your intervention. Yeah. And by the way, John is the role model of Quincy, so that's why he doesn't say nothing. Yeah, he's.
well, I interrupted him earlier, so.
Yes.
All right.
So it's okay.
Please.
But that's all right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a couple of things, and then I was going to ask and see if maybe we could throw it up into the crowd.
I was about to do that, but first
right?
go on to your intervention.
So
make sure you talk about reparations. I love you, John, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. So when thinking about capital and when thinking about these notions of financial independence, I keep coming back to the idea that I'm paying tax as well.
Yes.
Ja, natuurlijk.
And so whenever we get told like, hey, go look for your money elsewhere, I'm like, but the guy who has 5 people in his room is getting 100 grand and I have to scrape by with 5 and I need to ask, what is this about? And there we come back to the notion of political power, all right? And also in terms of European political power. We're here in the seat of Brussels. How many members of European Parliament are of color?
Ja.
How many of them are fighting and talking about issues about border crossing, migration in the terms of inclusivity? Of the how many? And so also in terms of the notion of inclusion, right? Why are events that are centering around bodies of color, people of color, intellectual production of color, why are they not seen as inclusive? Why is it when the dominant group is not centered, it's not inclusive? Why is it when the default understanding of what it means to be a European is questioned, is thrown out, is shifted, is destabilized? Why is it then important to include different voices? Okay. And so when I'm also thinking about the notion of violence, and I completely agree with you. The idea of toxic masculinity is something that we need to talk about, especially in terms of situations where men have been emasculated, where men are then trying to compete with white masculinity and are then going to the extreme. There are studies about this. It's not a question of being intellectual. It's a question of just doing your homework and reading up.
Okay, thank you.
And then one last point. So when thinking of violence, I keep thinking and I keep going back to what Fanon wrote about violence, right? Sometimes the violence of the dominant group needs a greater violence or equal violence to be overthrown. And then we have to think about what does that mean? And what does it mean when that power is overthrown? Where do we go from that? Is the existence of that violence then necessary, or should we then think about how to turn that energy into something that is about producing a future where we all can exist, and not just our humanity is seen, but our existence on this planet is seen, right? We need to go beyond the exceptionalism of humans as being the top totem pole of beings on this world.
That's why I love you.
It's interesting. Okay, thank you. So, all right. You see, we have a good representation of Holland here, huh? Right? Anyway, now the questions, the floor is yours. And please ask questions, not lectures. Because I know that some people like to make a second debate, but please, questions. And Mike is there? All right. Raise your hand so I can see it. Yes, there behind. Yes, I see you, yeah? Right? Yeah. Yeah.
My name is Dora. I'm, as you call it, artivist. I mean, an artist and an activist. I work with children, and I work in Africa a lot about decolonization of bodies. Thank you for... I agree with most of you, but for me, we have to start it from school. Because if we don't change the way we teach white history, if we don't teach black history in school programs, it will be always a big problems. Because I work with children, and in the same schools, you will see like black children who have good marks, you will see white who doesn't have good marks, but they always say, oh, I don't need to work as much as you because I'm white. I see that. I ask them to draw humanity. And most of them, they didn't draw one black people. Some of them did, but most of them, in the humanity, they put even a dog, but not even black person. So, of course, we are all the same in humanity. But if we don't include it in programs, in school programs, we're dead.
Can you ask your question, please?
Sorry?
Question.
No, it's not a question
So
because
say-
because you all answer to all my questions, but I was sorry, I won't be long, but I was in the Biennale at Venice because we're talking about the history, okay? But talk about the history present now, today, not only the past, because I was in the Biennale of Venice and I saw real migrants in front of everybody during the opening, okay? They used real migrants, and most of them were blacks. And they were making lamps all day long for 6 months in front of everybody. And so I asked the artist, who was Olafur Jensen, I said, can somebody explain what's going on? And they say, oh, you know, he didn't even want to talk to me. So most of them were black men, young black men, okay? And they were collectors there in front of everybody. Oh, it's real migrants, let me take a pictures. And you see the migrants, they were, okay, posing, you know, and everybody thinks it was normal.
All right. So you mean human zoo?
So I just mean that if we don't want to see things like in Libya, if you don't want to be considered like dogs or like not a part of humanity, we have to put it back in school programs. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, the second one who's going to ask a question. A question. Please. Hand raise.
I'd like to respond to the notion of modern art and contemporary art using black bodies. I think that's a really good point. Also in terms of thinking not just the participation of blackness as an object, but what happens when it becomes a subject position to think through art about, right? So when does it become not just about the black body as an object of study, but the black body as the subject to which change is enacted? So then the question becomes like, how many curators of color work at the Bozar? How many black curators here program things? Is Afropolitan Festival the only time when 4 or 5 black bodies are on the stage during the rest of the year? These are the type of questions that we then need to talk about, because it doesn't just about equality, it's also about equity, right? How much equity do we have and how much do we get involved? How much time, space are we able to grab and take a hold of? So I'm extremely grateful to be here. Don't get me wrong, Bozar. But for me, it's about going beyond my presence here. Like, what will this do for the next?
Right, thank you.
Yeah, and maybe another thing about that is also we should be careful about the fact that we all participate sometimes in the performing of Black death. And violence, and that's what you were talking about with the biennial, is this violence, performing of violence against the black body, and we accept it. I mean, a really famous case of that was what happened at the Whitney Biennial, when Parker Bright stood in front of the Dana White piece of Emmett Till, you know, and how that becomes acceptable in different places and different spaces, and we also participate in that. So how do we, like Gloria Wecker, your mentor, said, how do we make sure, instead of that, we make sure that we participate in the creation of new stories, new ways of identifying ourselves, creating new canons. So I think that that's also a really significant aspect of something like Black History Month, Black Achievement Month, looking at 400 years, 500 years of our history, and then looking at how we stand now, and looking at how we make sure that new canons and new stories and how we identify ourselves are being given space and are being funded by the government. Give me money, Jay-Z, but you know, you too. Like Dory would say, Agent Orange. So I think it's really important to make sure that we use the resources to create new stories and new canons.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
Yes. Hi. Yes. My name is Kayla, and I'm just a citizen. I'm concerned about all these debates, and I have a question. So first, I join what she said. It's important to teach the history, particularly in Belgium, because I study in Belgium, and I've never they never taught me the history of colonialism, for example. So it's really important. It's really a big issue here in Belgium because they don't teach colonialism in school. So you have to know that. They don't teach colonialism in school in Belgium. So that is really important. That's my first observation. Now my questions. It's about the question of because Belgium is an old colony, and there are a lot of legacy of this colony in our streets. Statues, Leopold II, and there are, for example, there are people, I don't know if you heard that, they paint the statue of Leopold II. I don't know if you have heard about it in red.
Yeah.
You see, so it's a concern. And I want, because I think that it's important to teach that, it's important to know that there is this legacy, but I think also it's important to be inclusive and not to blame. So I want to know how to teach this history, how to teach this history in positive way, in constructive way. What do you think?
Yes, answer and then Linda.
I think the question or the comment that you're making is very true. In 1988, I did a play called The Nacht van de Brandende Apen. The Night of the Burning Apes. And that was based on a true story. A gentleman that actually died, passed away in 1974 in Antwerp, who was brought to Belgium in the 1950s, beginning of 1960s, a young boy of 10 years old from Zaire. And he was put in the dierentuin. It's called here something else.
Was Jeff? Huh? The name was Jeff, right?
Jeff.
Jeff.
You know the story.
But he's much older and he comes from Ghana.
Was he from Ghana?
Yes.
I thought it was from Zaire.
No, from Ghana.
From Ghana.
Yes.
So you know the story. Tone Brulin wrote a play about that. Tone Brulin wrote a play about it, and I together with Rufus Collins, directed it. De Nacht van de Brandende Apen. And I think those stories, when we were planning to bring the production to Belgium, first of all, they actually neglected it. They said the Belgians are not, they can't deal with this. It is impossible to bring it to Belgium. And we fought to bring it here. And it was supposed to actually get a rerun, but then they stopped the finance because they said there's too much emotions coming up within the community, so they stopped it. I don't know if you remember that.
And which year was it exactly?
1988.
No, I don't remember that. No.
You don't remember? I remember it as very lively. And it was also the same time that Rufus and I were also doing Evita bij de Koninklijk Ballet van Vlaanderen. And it was the upcoming from the Vlaamse Blok, if I'm not mistaken, Vlaamse Blok. And the Keizerlei, if I'm not mistaken, the name.
The main street.
The main street, Keizerlei. And I came with the train, and I was pushed by these people who were protesting in the streets. And the police looked at me, and they just kept walking. And I will never forget those three things happening at the same time in the same year. So if we're talking about history, and if we're talking about education, it's very important to also mention these things. And that's why I think it's very important to connect Black history and Black achievement both hand in hand. It cannot be separated from one another. To make sure that we create a win-win situation. Let's learn what happened and look at the present, but also make look at the future. Because education, I keep saying it, education is essential
Indeed, but I want to add something. Is what is really important also is that people do not share practices.
No.
Sometimes people do an action and think they are the first, while another generation did it 100 times. You know what I mean? And by example, concerning these memory issues, I remember there was a group in Brussels when they wanted to expose pygmies from Cameroon for an event. It was in the 90s. A group of the African diaspora protested. So afterwards they annihilated the event, just comparing to the Biennale of things. And then you had a theater piece about the human zoos by Chokri Benchika. And that piece, by example, involved in Ghent when they did it. And I played, I'm not an actor, but I played in that thing, is the mayor of Ghent excused himself in the name of the city of Ghent for the human zoo that happened in 1908 in Ghent. You know what I mean? But I'm sure in Brussels nobody knows about it. Okay? Exactly. And afterwards you had, by example, a group of the African diaspora, Congolese African diaspora, who every year commemorates the 7th of Tervuren. Every year. I'm sure a lot of young people do not know that and do not even participate to that commemoration. This is also part of history. Example, when that's why this event of Congolization, organized by Picho, is also trying to regroup also those different memories, because you cannot evolve if you don't build on the achievement of others.
Exactly.
And I think that it's not only important to show a moment where you say, this have happened, but what did our elders did?
Exactly.
And what can we do better? And which are the mistakes that they did so we don't repeat those mistakes?
Exactly.
But if we refuse to look at what happened just in the contemporary history, we will never gain evolution in changing things, like Linda was supposing. I'm sorry for the intervention. So, all right, thank you. I have a hand there.
Sorry.
All right. So first the lady and you. Okay. Yes.
Okay,
Yes. Please.
Hi. So the first time that I encountered Black History Month was in my high school in South Africa, and there it was extremely relevant and important because there were a lot of. It was the moment to kind of overturn the white dominant narrative, historical narrative in South Africa. But when I came back to Belgium, I realized that actually there weren't a lot of role models present in the mainstream media. Not saying that there aren't any role models, because I really think there are Black role models. And so my question is, do you also think that these role models that aren't like football stars or rappers and those people, do you think they're important too in the Black History Month?
Yes, please.
I remember reading many decades ago some fabulous stuff that's come from America. I think it's important for everybody, not just for the Black children, but actually for white children as well, to know that human beings, Black and white, have done some wonderful things. What I know about history is, certainly from America, that the Blackness of them got wiped out. So there was no reference, so it wasn't actually history. It was it does matter. It does matter to all of us, at least to get a sense of heritage that we're part of.
Yeah.
And certainly those of us of African origin are constantly being told that the heritage we come from is wholly negative. We shouldn't be very surprised when some of our boys, because boys, white ones as well, can do some pretty naughty things. So, if we're the rubbish we're giving it's amazing that so many of our young Black men are actually very well behaved, compared with the propaganda. So, I think we all need all of the stories, the good and the bad. Yeah, and I don't think merely being afraid and frightened by violence and all of that stuff. We don't need that. We don't want it. But if we're going to do history, then let's try to be as fair and thoughtful and honest as we can be.
Yes, thank you. Do you want to react, John or Quincy, on this question?
Well, the notion of role models is really important. And I think it's also a question of finding and searching for the silences, right? In the Netherlands, for example, I know of a lot of people who are doing PhDs of color, who are from the Dutch Caribbean, who are doing groundbreaking work, and you never hear about them.
Yeah.
While within their field, they're superstars, right? And then it's a question about, okay, so what's the dynamic that's going on there? And a lot of times it's also because when you get in that situation, you also try to avoid the limelight because it comes with a lot of baggage. I can tell you.
And can you explain, please, because people don't know the context. You laugh, but you're laughing alone. You know, and so share.
I think some other people in the audience are laughing too. What happens when you get pushed into the limelight, when it's not of your doing initially, you get hate mail, you get death threats, you get people who are obsessed about you who you've never even met. You have to call the police because people send you, they send you packages, huge packages. You're like, what is there? You need to call the bomb squad, that kind of stuff. And the thing is, so what happens to a lot of the people who are in situations, in careers that don't have the same type of support structure to deal with that, they stay out of the limelight. So then the question then becomes, okay, so what do you need to do to have still attention for them, but not put them into danger? And so what OCAN, which is an organization called Overleg Orgaan Caribische Nederlanders. So what's Overleg Orgaan? It's a
consultation organ. No?
Consultation organization for Dutch Caribbean. What they set up was the community pearls, or the Dutch Caribbean pearls, and that was an award ceremony in which people from different type of backgrounds will be put into the safe space, safe situation where people would know about their work. And so when thinking about the notions of also visibility of different voices, masculinity in masculinity, femininity, you realize that a lot of times also it's men that are being pushed forward, right? And what that also brings with it, I think, is a question of understanding how patriarchal systems in and of itself push men to the foreground, or within even group settings, you have more men talking than women. And there's a question of men being taught to understand their male privilege and using that in a sense to elevate the voices of others, right? So when is it time for me to shut up and let someone else speak? Or when is it time for me to understand that I should not accept an invitation to speak or recommend someone else? Even not just in terms of masculinity, femininity, but also in terms of hetero versus queer, right? So whose voices are being put forward as most important? So even in terms of role models, you mentioned footballers and film stars, all this kind of stuff. You're joking about the hyper-capitalist Jay-Z, and you're all right. And yet at the same time, I'm thinking that, okay, so we have that issue, then we need to figure out ways and figure out tools and mechanisms and structures to then also elevate the other voices. Yeah. Okay. And so when it comes to men as well, I think that's.
Can you wrap up?
I'll wrap up.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Before you answer.
Yeah, no, I mean, just a small thing. I mean, like when you think about, it's not by accident that the people that you see on the Flemish TV are the football artists and the musicians. That's not by accident. There's a story that needs to be told about how unproductive Black people and people of color are, right? So you have to then do the work yourself to look for other individuals, and that's okay, And another interesting thing is that if you compare something like the VRT, for example, in the Flemish landscape, to something like the black entertainment television, it's not the solution. Univision, sorry, I just did my Spanish there. I'm proud of myself. Southern California raised me. No, if you look at something like Univision, Univision and black entertainment television, with all their problems, they are very important outlets for showing black excellence, for showing Latinx excellence, so we should kind of look at those models and ask ourselves, what are they teaching us, about what the potential of creating new images, right? And then, holding the VRT accountable for having nothing but white folks there.
Okay, thank you for your nice explanation. Short, really short,
Very
and then I go
short.
to a question because the gentlemen have been waiting for a long time there, right?
I'm very happy that Quincy also addressed this, and also because last year in the year 2017, as the curator of the Black Achievement Month, I decided to also ask the attention of black cinema, of gay black cinema. And then people started mailing me. They were very furious. He said, black people have other problems, have more important problems. Why do you guys focus on those kind of films instead of other stuff? And I'm not going to even go there because I'm going to keep it short.
Yeah, please.
But I thought it was very important to do it. And I stand my ground. I stand my ground because I think we should also be aware that these issues should also be addressed within our own communities.
All right. Thank you. Sir.
Okay. I would like to just frame my specific question by saying that as a black Puerto Rican born in the United States and living in the Netherlands and recently migrating to Brussels, it's beautiful to see a panel of Pan-African, European people, thinking artists and intellectuals, talking about our contributions to society. Now, in a time, my specific question is that in a time of rising ugly nationalism that we see here in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in England, Sister Linda talked about being English. What does that being English, my specific question is, what contributions or what role do you think that black artists and intellectuals can have in remedying or answering the ugly nationalism that we see now in Europe?
Okay, can you give a short answer to this, Linda?
Tunde,
first?
please, I need to have your
wait,
answer there.
Tunde, and then artist, it comes to it.
Well, I insist on calling myself English because I was born in England. And I see or hear people who've got clearly Irish names or German names, and they're born in England, they call themselves English. Therefore, I have the right to. And all of our countries develop with the mobility of the humans, and we're part of that. So I insist. I mean, I do have a wide. My mother was Jewish, my father Nigerian. I was born in England. I'm a lesbian. I'm now an older woman. I haven't got a disability yet, but I'm sure it will come. It's not funny, but we can all of us tick more than one box when we're asked. So I think we should say with pride all of the things that we are.
Okay, please, thank you.
Maybe just real quickly in terms of that.
So he has his tea, right? He was complaining about his tea, but now I see that he drank it. So please, John, and then afterwards, Tunde. Yeah?
I think also I'm part of the Labour Party, but I think the old parties and also the Labour Party, I must say, they have neglected certain issues that actually were addressed by the African, European, Caribbeans. They have neglected it too long. And what has happened, that the other pool started very small and now are coming up. And you see that they feel confronted or they feel pushed in a corner, those European parties, racist or actually those new parties, let me call them like that, extremist, racist parties, they feel that it's being taken over. But it's reality. The clock cannot go backward. The clock can only go forward. Thank you. And so we will have to deal with it. And it also challenges all of us here, and also those who are not here, how to deal with it. Not only politics, but also we as a human being, because we have been in 2006, I was one of the campaign leaders. And for the first time, 73% people that didn't go to vote finally went to vote. And it started a whole thing in the Netherlands. We have to go and vote. Don't think that if we do not vote, it will pass over. It's not going to pass over. It's only going to become worse. And that's why I'm very happy. But she's not getting enough support also. I don't say that maybe I'll maybe vote for her, Sivana Simons in Holland. But I support her because what she is going through is hell. And we need to support also the voice of that new generation who is protesting against these things.
Thank you. Tunde?
Yeah, actually, I have to give the floor to some people.
All right. But
Thank you. I'm Modine Tambwe. Sorry for coming late, but I'm busy in 1 block away from here, where there is the Brussels African market. I invite you all to comment there, because that's also creativity from our people. Coming back to the lesson of the existing month, I'm not sure if it's linked to the lessons of the past, but I think for here, it's also not only the need of heroes, figures, role model, and example to follow, but it's also setting a new way of working with les Noirs. Because I like, je suis une Noire en français, j'en suis fière, and the English has been, is really sexy, but it's making the story sexy. But in Belgium, in French, and in German, or in Dutch, we have to go and dig to the relationship we have today, because these are the foundation of our stories every month here. And if we want to have a Black History Month, une histoire, un mois de l'histoire des Noirs, c'est l'histoire contemporaine that is built up with the past, that makes it that today we have a Black Afro market that is happening outside this building. The African food is outside the building. And how do we interact with those spaces? How do we today interact with those spaces? And it's really crucial. If we want the thing to be serious, the participation of everyone in this is to rethink our spaces. It's not only about the heroes, it's also the spaces that is given to us. Today, that's when the month will have a sense.
Thank you, Modi Tambwe. Thank you. Can you please, there, you had a question, right? No, he had a question first, and then afterwards to you.
Do you think that you have to be Black to defend Black rights, and do you think it's possible to have a white figure as a defender?
You beat me too. Just before I gave you the microphone, I was about to break it down for you. Thanks for asking the question. So what, are you done? Okay, sorry. I should not be doing that. My mama taught me better than that. And
you interrupted me.
No, I'm so sorry. That's really rude. All right.
All right.
Did I?
Okay, no problem.
Yeah,
no problem.
okay.
All right.
Jeez.
So, second question, so you can respond maybe the two.
No, just maybe because I'll forget. I'll forget.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Go on.
No, just because what you were saying, it was exactly what I was thinking, and also linked to what you were saying in terms of, like, I was when you asked the question back there, someone asked the question, I was thinking about Baldwin's nigga, right? And while James Baldwin was giving the speech with Gregory Hines next to him, sorry.
Yes.
Thanks, Dick Gregory, not Gregory Hines. Gregory Hines is a jazz musician, wonderful jazz musician, and Dick Gregory is a comedian and a tap dancer. Okay, I'm getting all wrong. Sorry.
That's all right.
Thanks, Dory. Oh yeah. So there's that part where this white man asked the similar question, and I think that one thing that's really important, similar question to what you're asking. One thing that's really important now, of course, is this idea of accomplice versus allies. What has been problematic for so long for, especially white individuals who want to be part of the movement or who want to do good, is that they're often used to and they're often comfortable with being allies, but what you should think about is how can you be an accomplice? How can you put your privilege in danger so that my life and the life of other individuals can be easier? My worries and my woes can be easier. So, really thinking about being an accomplice, I think in 2018, when you look at, Black death still really being a present thing, and violence against Black bodies really being present, is, asking the question, how do you become an accomplice?
Okay. So you wanna react on this?
All right.
All right, that's so good. There was another question there. Yes, please.
Sure.
Yeah, but I don't see there. Yeah, but.
Well, I have a mic. I can ask my
please,
question while I have
go
a
on,
mic.
go on.
So we said Black history is human history. Human history, actually, in Belgium especially, but everywhere in the world, is not. It is bleached history, because people have been purposely taken out of history. So it's rebleached, and I am not going here only about the Black question, but also women, disabled people, and so on. Quincy talked about the pillars, how society, it's always a divide and rule. It's amazing. It's really efficient. We've been doing this forever. The first part of this debate was in concretization, and we talked a little bit about Congo. And what I have a question at the end, but what I can actually notice is that we are really divided. I mean, we've been divided and we keep dividing. And in Brussels, we know our history. I'm personally, my Black part is from the US. That's usually the question. And we talk a lot about Congo. And I'm also a history teacher, and I think that Congo needs to be back in history, definitely. Someone mentioned that there is no colonization, we don't talk about colonization in class, which isn't true because it's in the program, but people, actually I know some teachers who will purposely choose to talk about Greek colonization, because it is colonization. It's just, the word has to be in it, we don't talk about Black people. So my question is, how do we unite? I think we need to talk about the Black experience as a diaspora, not because I talked about it, I asked a question more or less last time, and Mireille Tsessi Robert has told me, we are all Congolese. Well, I'm sorry, but we all have our own trauma. And I cannot be Congolese for the Congolese. I think we need to talk about our common ground, like we exist, we are a community, there are a lot of Black people everywhere. Why? Why are we here? What can we do? And now we go into details about Congo.
All right, thank you. I take one more question, and then afterwards I go to the panel. Please, yes. Dory Wilson. I introduce her too.
Hi, family. How you doing? Loving my people on the stage. Thank you very much. But there's a couple things. I've been here for 16 years, so I'll preface it by that. So I've been on the sidelines and on the inside, and I work for the European institution, so I kind of have a little bit of a perspective about being here. But one of the things that concerns me, which kind of goes to your point here, is that I'm really struck by the fact that I think almost all of my friends that were born and raised here never had a teacher that looked like them. And everyone in my family was a teacher. So, and I'm sitting next to, you know, a fabulous filmmaker and teacher, and one of the things that struck me as I sat next to her on Wednesday at dinner was, what would it be like for I met a young black man who's doing sculpture in the art school here, and he was talking about how his critiques are done when he does his work. And I burst into tears. I mean, I couldn't keep it together. And so one of the things that was striking about it was just this notion that to have the fabulous Julie Dash come here and teach film to young people, that's the first layer. But the second layer is young people of color, and also be aware that it would be an experience for everyone to stand in a space with an artist of that magnitude, but also to face the fact that that's not an experience they had up until that moment. So one of the things that's really striking to me is that, you know, how do we get to a point where everyone wants to talk about education, but education is a factory of colonialism and oppression. So to just say, oh yeah, it needs to be education. I mean, 4 years ago, a friend of mine that has 2 young black boys in public school here was given a Where's Waldo project where there was a black character and a bunch of so-called African huts, and he had to find Waldo 4 years ago. And these are children whose grandfather is South African. So they came to their mother and was like, Mommy, what is this story? I mean, this ain't South Africa. I know South Africa. So this is the kind of, how do we get young people to take the risk, because it's risky to do that kind of work.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dory Wilson, for your contribution. So, yes, Linda, and all of you, by the way, to answer all these 3 questions in once.
My answer is, I don't think there's one way. I think that we have to use what is powerful for us. We are talking about truth. We're talking about not the distorted history of racism. And I suspect that it starts with us knowing something ourselves so that we can share it with our colleagues, with our families, with our children. Having some knowledge, which means we're actually having reading lists, passing them round, seeing if we can get books published, finding ways in which we can communicate ideas, because we're talking about our humanity, and in general it does strike me that racism denies us an important sense of ourself, our history, where we come from, what we can do, not just what we can't do and what our problems are. So sharing that is what I recall from the 1960s and 70s. We did that sort of thing. We need to do that again. We did that in largish places like America, like Britain, and the black communities here and in the rest of Europe may be smaller. But we can still do that thing of sharing with each other thoughts and ideas. There used to be something called consciousness raising groups. Anyone remember? Important for us to start them again. Not everybody will want to come, want to be involved, but those of us who do surely get some sense of solidarity, of the wealth of sharing what we know and building on that. It worked in the past to change our consciousness, because that's what we need to do. It's not guns we need, or even money. It's actually our hearts and our heads need to understand who we are, to have pride in ourselves, and I want to go on to say pride in humanity, because I don't want to see black African people feeling superior. One of the things we're arguing about is white people feeling superior. So we don't get rid of it by doing the same blasted thing. We find out about the history of which we are part. It's a specific history, and then there is a general history of which we are part. I think that knowledge is power. That's, I think, all I want to say.
Thank you. John?
I don't have much more to say than what my dear colleague has said. But one thing, when I say education, I mean, yeah. The stories have been, what I already said before, the stories have been neglected for too long. And I think we have to disclose all those stories. And that's why I'm very happy that actually for this opportunity to share here and also with you, everyone who's here, but it has to be further than only within this context. And what I hope, what I truly hope, is that it doesn't only stay in the month of February, but the whole year through. And that those who fund realize that they have to keep funding, because otherwise they won't have the public to actually come and sit in. So the schools is one, the universities is one, but also the arts is a very crucial point, because I always say the arts bring people together. I always say that. I believe it, but it's more than that. And indeed, I'm very happy that Judi Dash is here, because I remember when I saw her film, when I was in film school at Columbia University, it blew my mind away. And it put me to think, just same thing as Toni Morrison's books. And Maya Angelou and all the others. So and that is what I mean with educating one another. We have an obligation to educate one another.
Right, thank you. Real short, Tunde and Quincy.
I don't really have much more to say, actually.
Do you want to give the mic to somebody?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe one thing to think about is, in regards to Dory's question is, the whole, for example, in South Africa, they had the Wits Must Fall, Roads Must Fall, and in Amsterdam, they also had the kind of decolonizing of Yuva. So I think that that's really kind of the basis of the question a little bit is kind of recognizing that indeed these educational systems are racist and problematic. Yeah. I have a friend, or I'm lucky to have a friend, who did a research in Flanders, and her thesis, her hypothesis was that the waterval system, oh yeah,
no.
Can you explain that?
No, in fact, there are different periods in the school system in Flanders where you have to choose a direction, and in fact, it helps to enhance, inequity. Yeah, that's what they call the waterfall system.
Yeah. So what you have then is that you have black kids, brown kids going to technical schools instead of going to general and higher schools. So basically, her hypothesis is that Flemish education systems is racist. So that's what we have to recognize first and start from there.
All right. Okay. Quincy?
Thank you for the question, Dory. And also thank you, Antonia, and also thank you, what's your name? Thank you, Ida. I think I'll try to combine answers to these questions. So when thinking about nationality and borders and nations, I think we need to start understanding that the black experience does not usually come with a shared passport, right? My passport is not the same as someone else who is black, who could be sitting next to me to the train, who will get a different type of shock when they see a police officer, or get a different type of shock when getting into stores, right? Coming from the Dutch Caribbean made me aware of that. Also because coming from the Dutch Caribbean, I had the opportunity to have teachers who looked like me. right? That changes your complete perspective. Also in the notion of how people treat you, what chances you get, what's allowed in class in terms of behavior. I've heard from friends of mine who grew up in the Netherlands, who were born in the Netherlands, that being seen as a black boy or a black girl was always being seen as disruptive. Always being seen as someone who was, who needed to be put in a corner, who needed to be told to shut up, right? While precociousness of white kids would be seen as a kid enacting their agency. Even that difference will lead to different types of behaviors, different types of understanding of what the chances of school can mean, right? And so when we come to think about how do we bring those together in terms of solidarity, then it is about questioning, okay, what dominant black narrative is going around and how do we make sure that the narratives that we create and think about are inclusive? So how do I connect to friends of mine who are in situations that I would never understand because I was brought up in a colonial system, right? And then how do you make sure that then that understanding doesn't just stay with you, but becomes part of your everyday practice? So in terms of understanding what you do with education, I was recently invited by a couple of educational institutions to talk about my work. Now the first thing I do is I introduce them to work of my friends. And then they watch me and they're like, okay, who is this? And I'm like, yeah, you need to know Maria Teresa Diaz Neria's work. You need to know that. You need to talk about Walter Mignolo. You need to talk about Charles Lundvrecht, Patricia Kaarsenhout. You need to know these people's names. And they're like, where can I find information? And I send it to them. So it's about making sure that you become an oil spill, right? That you're the one who is spreading it and you're the one who are making sure that what's going on in the education, the materials that you present are the ones that they can then further build on. So when talking and thinking about our positions within society and positions within education, it is about talking about Cosmic Theater and Felix de Rooij. It is about talking about Rufus Collins, and not just the fact of what he did in the Netherlands, but also the fact that when he came as a US citizen to London, he created the group Keskide, right? And then with Keskide from London, a borough from London, he went to New Zealand and talked with the Maori there. And what happens when you get those type of conversations about colonizations, about islands, and you move beyond this understanding of it's just us. No, it's all of us.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And I think, thank you for this great contribution, all of you. Like you said, but I will be an old spill. I will start today by saying that I want to pay a tribute to two persons living in Belgium from African descent. One being the greatest African actor who lived here in Belgium, Dieudonné Kabongo. Yeah. And I think that many of you who don't know him now, go search and try to find out who he is. And one of the biggest intellectuals of African descent, Pambu, Pambu Kita, you know. And just to say that those are contemporary stories, but strong stories of references. So we need to know the past, yes. The experience of the black experience is multiple, multidimensional, you know what I mean? And takes place in different spaces, you know what I mean? That you need to discover. And what he said also, which is true, is different trajectories, which makes it difficult to, like you say, unite. You can unite on thematics. You can unite in punctual goals. It's already a lot, even if you are not all the time united. But if you are united to fight for justice, to fight for equity, to tell stories, you're already doing a lot. But it starts first by recognizing the histories of the people who are around you. And like you say, spilling it out. So thank you a lot. Give a big applause to any single of them. And we have started the Afropolitan Festival, and there is going to be the opening in the Horta room of the Afropolitan Festival. So please be there. There are many great artists who are going to be present. And thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to those ones who introduced it also. Thank you. And can somebody give to Tunde a tea, please? he wanted to drink one. You know what?
So you all welcome. Thank you very much, because everything you said was definitely food for thoughts, and there are definitely stories we can relate to. So now there is the official opening in the Horta Hall. So there will be a crump performance from Bintu Dembele, and also Dutch Norris will be there, Freddy Massamba, and a lot of artists. So please go there straight and have fun. Thank you.